I wanted my money back. It was very disappointing.
They are pretending like Rachel Zegler is the first of them all when she looks like Lord Farquaad in the film.
Rachel Zegler, like so many kids raised on TikTok, she's all for infantada is the only global solution.
This Snow White version is woke and feminist and progressive.
They're leaning into woke. Hardcore.
They're petrified of some kind of backlash. Of course, like with everything on the left these days, they just take it too far.
It just doesn't make any sense.
It makes a little bit more sense.
You can gaslight people so easily.
If you disagree with the sentiment, just hit the unfollow button. I don't need your business. Thank you.
So the two stars hate each other.
She's not going to be safe with the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
So apparently, according to them and according to the writers of Snow White, women can't even want to be in love anymore.
I sat through the whole thing. This was really bad. It was extremely leftist on every political dimension: racial politics, sexual politics, class politics, regime politics. Its narrative was cowardly. It was just awful.
The movie is doing catastrophically. They spent $300 million and it currently has a 2.2 out of 10 rating on IMDb.
Every way that Disney changed the story, it changed it for the worse.
Disney deleted Someday My Prince Will Come and made a modernized feminist alternative. It's awful, generic. Never mind that the lyrics make no sense at all. All you have to do to make your dream come true is let it echo. Is it like on a metaphorical level?
So I think that certainly helps her because she's a PR nightmare. I don't know how anyone would hire her, but again, there is some talent there. It is a familiar story.
And then they couldn't put dwarfs finding a way to find their way back to doing something not progressive. You'd think the most progressive thing would be get people jobs, and dwarfs want to work. That many scripts that come down the pike.
No, only 7 of them.
That has, and there's seven dwarf jobs here.
Oh my God, we're $242 million in, and our lead actress hates our film, our actors, our storyline. There's rumors that she and Gal Gadot don't get along either because one's pro-Palestinian, one is pro-Israel.
They're remaking the movie. They just got rid of the dwarfs. Okay,
but what do they call them?
Why would they get rid of the dwarfs though?
Magical creatures.
But they have one token dwarf amongst these magical creatures. You actually just went backwards. You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it. Argument should have been from Peter Dinklage. There's power of being on TV. There's power of television. And to put 7 people with dwarfism on camera in a major Disney movie, there's still power there. If the story is offensive, change the story. Don't change the characters.
They couldn't have dwarves. Do you guys remember?
Yeah, because Peter Dinklage and all them were talking crap.
So originally they
took a picture of what the dwarves were supposed to look like.
I can find it, but it was an array. It was the DEI of dwarves. Yep. Well, they had to reshoot the film and use CGI dwarves. There you go.
So those guys didn't make it.
The modern empowered Snow White won't even allow domestic labor carried out by herself. Instead, she orders the dwarves to tidy up themselves, even when they've had a hard day down the mine.
It's their house.
But it's so obvious now because of the blight of intersectionality that's spread throughout our entire society.
What happens when woke politics crash headfirst into timeless fairy tales? The answer is simple. You get a $242 million dumpster fire that leaves everyone scratching their heads. And that's exactly what happened with Rachel Zegler's disastrous Snow White. Critics didn't hold back, calling it revisionist Marxist garbage wrapped in a shiny Disney bow. Fans, on the other hand, didn't even bother showing up. Instead, they stayed home in droves, leaving theaters emptier than a ghost town on opening weekend. Meanwhile, Disney execs were left sobbing into their soy lattes, wondering how their golden goose had suddenly turned into a financial albatross. But before we dive headfirst into the chaos of this unmitigated disaster, let's rewind the clock and take a closer look at how Rachel Zegler, a young actress once hailed as Hollywood's next big thing, managed to go from rising star to box office poison faster than you can say woke nightmare. It's a story filled with arrogance, bad decisions, and enough cringeworthy moments to make even the most diehard Disney fan cringe. When Rachel Zegler was cast as Snow White, many saw it as her golden ticket to stardom. It was the role that could cement her place in Hollywood history, stepping into the iconic shoes of a character loved by generations. But instead of embracing the magic of the role and honoring what made people fall in love with Snow White in the first place, she decided to step onto a soapbox and trash the very foundation of the story. Back in 2022, She publicly called the 1937 version weird and outdated because apparently the world needed a TikTok activist to tell us our childhoods were offensive. She didn't stop there, oh no. In an era where nostalgia reigned supreme, Rachel declared that her Snow White wouldn't dream about love anymore. Gone was the idea of being saved by Prince Charming or even longing for true love. Instead, her Snow White would be focused on becoming a boss babe, dreaming of leadership and empowerment. Nothing screams happily ever after like a 2-hour TED Talk on female empowerment wrapped in CGI and cringeworthy dialogue, right? But Rachel didn't stop at reimagining the story. She went full throttle into divisive territory. She took to social media, posting anti-Trump rants that alienated half the country. At one point, she even said she hoped Trump supporters never know peace.
Real charming, right?
Because nothing says family-friendly Disney princess like spewing political venom online. Half of America tuned out instantly, rolling their eyes at her tone-deaf commentary, while the other half couldn't wait to see her fail. And fail she did, in spectacular fashion. Her behavior became the talk of the town, but not in the way anyone had hoped. Instead of being celebrated as the new face of Disney magic, she became a lightning rod for controversy, setting herself up for what would become one of the biggest box office flops in recent memory. Rachel's attitude seemed to reflect a growing trend in Hollywood, the belief that reinventing beloved classics to fit modern ideologies would resonate universally. Unfortunately for her, audiences weren't buying it. They wanted charm, romance, and wonder, not lectures disguised as fairy tales. And as her off-screen antics continued to overshadow her role, it became clear that Rachel wasn't just failing to win over fans, she was actively driving them away. By the time the movie hit theaters, the damage was done. People weren't just disinterested, they were outright hostile. And Rachel, well, she was standing right in the middle of the wreckage, holding the match that lit the fire. If you thought Rachel's antics were bad, wait until you hear what Disney did to the actual movie. Gone was the sweet Snow White who found joy in kindness. In her place stood a full-time nagging feminist ready to lecture everyone about empowerment. Romance?
Banned.
Prince Charming? Reduced to a random extra who drifts in and out of scenes like he forgot where he parked his horse. And don't even get me started on the music. They replaced Someday My Prince Will Come with something called Echo Echo. Yes, Echo Echo. Because apparently, all your dreams come true if you just shout them into the void. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? But that wasn't even the worst of it. The filmmakers didn't stop at ruining the romance. They gutted the entire emotional core of the story. Snow White, once a symbol of innocence and hope, was now recast as a preachy, self-righteous figure more interested in bossing people around than spreading joy. Instead of dreaming of love or finding happiness through connection, she spent her time lecturing woodland creatures and dwarfs about female empowerment. It felt less like a fairy tale and more like a 2-hour TED Talk on why traditional values are outdated. And then there's the evil queen. Once an iconic villain dripping with jealousy and drama, she was watered down into a bland character fighting over vague power struggles. No mirror monologues, no juicy rivalry, just limp dialogue and awkward CGI stares. Remember the chilling line, "Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" Yeah, forget that. The new version had her stumbling through some convoluted subplot about corporate greed? Or maybe systemic oppression. Honestly, it was hard to tell because nothing made sense anymore. What should have been a fiery showdown between good and evil devolved into a series of cringe-worthy moments that left audiences scratching their heads. Disney somehow managed to strip every ounce of magic, romance, and fun from the original and replace it with a wet blanket of progressive nonsense. Every beloved element of the classic was either altered beyond recognition or thrown out entirely. The forest animals that used to sing alongside Snow White? Now they're just props for her empowerment speeches. The cute quirks of the 7 dwarfs? Replaced by politically correct caricatures that lacked any real personality. Even the huntsman, who once spared Snow White out of compassion, was rewritten as some kind of woke vigilante delivering monologues about ethics. By the time the credits rolled, viewers weren't walking away with warm, fuzzy feelings. They were leaving confused, frustrated, and wondering how such a timeless story could be butchered so badly. Critics panned it as revisionist Marxist garbage, while parents complained that their kids couldn't follow the plot. Disney had taken one of the most magical tales ever told and turned it into a chaotic mess of conflicting ideologies and half-baked ideas. If this was supposed to be progress, someone needed to remind them that sometimes progress means knowing when not to mess with perfection. Now, let's talk about the dwarfs, or rather, what Disney didn't do with them. Originally, the plan was to cast real little people, which makes perfect sense since they're, dwarfs. It's not exactly rocket science to figure out that hiring actors who actually embody the characters might be a good idea. But then Peter Dinklage stepped in, flexing his Hollywood privilege back in 2022, and complained that casting little people as dwarfs would somehow be backward and offensive. Apparently, hiring a Latina actress to play Snow White is progressive, but casting little people to play dwarfs? That's just outdated and offensive, according to him. So, naturally, Disney buckled immediately, because when has Disney ever stood firm on anything remotely controversial? They scrapped the original casting plans and decided, oh so brilliantly, to replace the iconic 7 dwarfs with CGI magical creatures. These glowing blobs looked like rejected extras from Avatar, or something straight out of a bad fantasy video game. Leaked pictures of these bizarre creations hit the internet, and audiences lost it. People laughed harder at those weird CGI monstrosities than they did at Rachel Zegler's attempts at acting. Once again, Disney proved they have no clue what they're doing. Real dwarf actors weren't thrilled either. While Peter Dinklage sits comfortably on his Game of Thrones fortune, hundreds of marginalized performers were left devastated. For many of them, this could have been the biggest opportunity of their careers, a chance to shine in a major Disney production. Instead, they watched as Disney threw their dreams under the bus for the sake of virtue signaling. And if you thought things couldn't get worse, Disney decided to slap a half-baked fix on the situation during reshoots. They scrambled to create what they called diverse bandits, though no one can quite explain what that even means. Were they supposed to be dwarfs? Magical creatures? Random woodland thieves? Audiences sat in theaters scratching their heads, wondering who these strange Renaissance fair rejects were supposed to be. The whole thing felt like a chaotic mess, one that only added to the growing pile of reasons why this movie was such a colossal failure. In the end, the 7 dwarfs, the heart and soul of the original story, were replaced by 7 dysfunctional CGI blobs with less personality than a damp paper towel. Disney didn't just miss the point. They took the point, threw it into a blender, and served it up as a woke smoothie. While Disney was busy botching the movie, Rachel Zegler took it upon herself to alienate half the country on social media, turning her personal brand into a dumpster fire of controversy. Her Instagram posts aged like spoiled milk, filled with cringe-worthy rants about politics and society that left fans scratching their heads. She didn't stop there, oh no. In an utterly baffling move, she accused Steven Spielberg's team of forcing her to prove her Latina heritage during press tours for West Side Story. This accusation came out of nowhere and made people question whether she truly understood how Hollywood worked, or if she just enjoyed stirring the pot. Keep in mind, this is Steven Spielberg we're talking about, one of the most respected directors alive, a man whose name alone carries decades of cinematic legacy. Yet here was Rachel, throwing shade at him while riding the coattails of his success. It wasn't just tone deaf, it was career sabotage. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, things were getting even worse. Leaked reports revealed that Disney execs were already panicking over what they had unleashed by casting her as Snow White. Internal emails painted a grim picture. Rachel was being quietly labeled box office poison, long before the premiere. Executives whispered among themselves about pulling promotional funding or rethinking future projects involving her. And who could blame them? By the time Snow White hit theaters, Rachel had managed to piss off both sides of the political spectrum. Conservatives hated her for her anti-Trump rants, where she wished misery on anyone who dared support him. Liberals, on the other hand, rolled their eyes at her performative activism, which often felt more like virtue signaling than genuine advocacy. Every tweet, Every post, every public statement seemed calculated not to inspire but to divide. And divide she did, burning every bridge she crossed in spectacular fashion. If you ever wondered how someone could single-handedly turn a $242 million project into a cultural disaster zone, look no further than Rachel Zegler's social media meltdown. How did audiences react to this avalanche of woke chaos? In droves, they simply stayed home. The backlash was swift and brutal. Attendance plummeted by a staggering 60% compared to the Cinderella remake, turning what should have been a blockbuster opening weekend into a ghost town at theaters across the country. Families that typically flocked to Disney releases were nowhere to be found. Parents didn't want to bring their kids to a movie that felt more like a political statement than a fairy tale. Little girls, who usually clamored for princess dolls and dresses, showed no interest in Rachel Zegler's Snow White. Grown-ups, too, turned their backs on the merchandise. Dwarf dolls, themed toys, and even Snow White costumes sat untouched on store shelves like forgotten relics. And it wasn't just families skipping the film. Wall Street took notice as well. When Disney's stock dropped a sharp 3% following the premiere, it became clear that this wasn't just a PR disaster, it was a financial catastrophe. Investors weren't shy about pointing fingers either. One look at Rachel Zegler's polarizing public persona, coupled with the film's abysmal reception, had them fleeing faster than you could say woke nightmare. Analysts were quick to call it one of the most avoidable flops in recent memory. By alienating its core audience with an overly politicized retelling of a beloved classic, Disney had effectively shot itself in the foot, and everyone knew it. Congratulations, Rachel. You've managed to single-handedly tank not only your own career, but also the stock price of one of the world's largest entertainment brands. If there's ever been a cautionary tale about the dangers of over-politicizing art, this is it. By early 2025, Rachel realized she might have gone too far. In a desperate attempt at damage control, she flipped the switch and started gushing about how much she loved Snow White at a Disney World promo event. Cue the fake tears and emotional speeches about how Snow White's superpower is her heart. Except nobody bought it. Fans rose to her apology as the worst acting performance of her career, calling it stiff, awkward, and painfully insincere. Industry insiders whispered behind closed doors that no one in Hollywood wanted to touch her with a 10-foot pole. One producer even joked, "If I see her name on a casting list, I'll assume it's a prank." Her PR team scrambled to salvage what was left of her reputation, but every move they made seemed to dig the hole deeper. Rachel tried leaning into social media, posting vague apologies and claiming she was growing as an artist, but her posts only fueled more mockery online. Memes comparing her apology to a hostage video went viral within hours. Meanwhile, leaked emails revealed that Disney execs were privately fuming over her behavior, with one executive allegedly writing, "We've handed this woman a golden ticket, and she set the entire factory on fire." The backlash wasn't just limited to fans and studios. Her co-stars reportedly distanced themselves from her after rumors surfaced of heated arguments on set. At this point, Rachel's career is wobbling like a drunk flamingo trying to balance on one leg during an earthquake. Every interview she gives feels like another misstep, every public appearance a disaster waiting to happen. If she doesn't learn to shut her mouth soon, or at least hire someone who can teach her the art of subtlety, it's going to collapse completely. Hollywood moves fast, and no one's lining up to cast the actress who publicly trashed her own movie, alienated her fans, and embarrassed her studio. Even worse, younger actresses are already circling her territory, ready to swoop in and take whatever scraps remain of her once promising trajectory. It's a harsh reminder that fame is fleeting, especially when you manage to offend half the planet before your second major film release. Here lies Rachel Zegler's fairy tale, dead, buried, and unmourned. She went from trying to be the fairest of them all to becoming the biggest flop of them all. No prince is coming to save her, no magic mirror is going to fix this one, and no amount of fake tears at Disney World is going to put her career back together. Rachel Zegler didn't just stumble into this mess. She practically bulldozed her way into it with a mix of arrogance, poor decisions, and an unrelenting need to push a political agenda that alienated half the country before the movie even hit theaters. Her constant social media rants, trashing beloved classics, and picking fights with anyone who dared to disagree with her woke worldview turned what could have been a magical moment into a full-blown disaster. And let's not forget Disney's role in this catastrophe. Was Rachel doomed from the start? Or did Disney set her up to fail? It's hard to say. On one hand, Rachel's inability to stay out of controversy made her a walking PR nightmare. On the other hand, Disney seemed determined to strip every ounce of magic out of Snow White, replacing it with a preachy, uninspired lecture that nobody asked for. The studio's obsession with being progressive led to baffling decisions like scrapping the iconic dwarfs for CGI blobs and turning Prince Charming into a random extra who drifts in and out of scenes like he's lost. Meanwhile, Rachel's attempts at damage control only made things worse. Her emotional apology tour felt as sincere as a used car salesman's handshake, and fans weren't buying it for a second. At this point, it's clear that Rachel Zegler's career is wobbling like a drunk flamingo, and unless she learns to step away from the keyboard and stop shoving her modern vision down everyone's throats, it's only a matter of time before it collapses completely. Hollywood moves fast, and no one's lining up to cast the actress who publicly trashed her own movie, her own fans, and her own studio. If you enjoyed watching Rachel's fairy tale crash and burn, hit that subscribe button for more brutal takedowns. What do you think? Was Rachel doomed from the start, or did Disney set her up to fail? Let me know in the comments below.